Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Procore Championship, also known as the Fortnite Championship from last year, but a new title sponsor here in 2024. And gonna break down everything you need to know about this week's golf tournament to go out there and get your research process started. So, gonna start it off with a look at the golf course, some of my key stats out here for the Procore, and then afterwards go through some of my top pieces of DFS and outright betting exposure for this week to give you a little taste of how I'm approaching this fall swing event and how you might want to model your process yourself. So sit back, relax, get ready for this event. It was nice to have a little week off there for once, but super stoked to get back after it here for the fall swing. Let's go ahead and start it off with a look at the golf course and some of those key stats of the week. There won't be any full golf course breakdowns here during the fall as I'm really busy out there with some of my showdown content as well for football, but gonna focus on some of the things I'm looking for in players here. So in terms of our stat model, this isn't an overly long golf course, but also one that doesn't necessarily reward driving accuracy, as the driving accuracy percentage is sub 50% around Silverado. So pretty much everyone and anyone is going to miss fairways. It is much more about your ability to hold some of these smaller greens. They're only about 5,000 square foot, and also go out there and make some putts. So I would say it's very typical for some of these fall swing events. Not a lot of long, bomber sort of golf courses that we're going to see. They're a little bit more fair. I'd say the range of winners could be, anywhere from a bomber to a shorter player. And you've seen that around a Silverado. We've had guys like Cameron Champ win in the past. I'd say guys like a Homa, a Thagalo who won last year. Are definitely guys that hit the ball a little bit further. But then we've also had guys that are more accuracy first players win. Some putting specialists over the last 5 to 10 years. So in terms of a winner, I don't think we have to narrow it down to one specific type of player, but more so we want some form heading in, some guys that can make some putts on some bent POA greens, and that's what you're going to see with my key stats this week. So the approach distribution maybe a little bit shorter than what we had for some of the events towards the end. Definitely a course that doesn't have all that much length to it. So I'd say from 175 yards out to about 125 are going to be some of your key proximity buckets. The putting stats, you might want to look at some bent POA, as that is the surface of the week. But I think that form heading in is going to be the number one thing I'm looking at out there from the putting perspective. This isn't a course where you want to hunker down on the accuracy too much. Same thing with distance. Distance is always going to be helpful at a tour event, but it is not the end-all be-all around Silverado. And more so looking for some of these par 5 scoring metrics, and then also birdie or better percentage, just your raw scoring ability heading into this event. As it is a par 72, you do have the 4 par 5s to work with per round. So you're going to see some birdies, and those that can take advantage of some of the easier scoring looks are oftentimes you see towards the top of the leaderboard. So guys like Sahith, Max Homa came into the event popping in both of these categories, so not a surprise that they make their way into my modeling. And then for our comp courses, we've got 4 that I wanted to point out. We've got 4 relatively easy golf courses as well. You've got Detroit Golf Club, TPC Deer Run, Craig Ranch, and Summerlin all out there on the TPC rotation that are all golf courses where you see maybe minus 15 to minus 20 winner out there in each case. And it's not really all about the ball striking. You can make it a second shot golf course if you're out there dialed in with your irons, but you can also putt well above your baseline and also get there at these sort of golf courses. So you've seen some crossover. You've also have some bent POA greens in the mix out there at those different tracks, but more so from the scoreability standpoint, the par 5 scoring and birdie or better percentage are things that we're looking for at all 4 of these tracks as well. So that's it from the stat standpoint. I don't think it's a golf course where we're looking for a very specific type of player, like we would at some of the other tracks on tour. If there's one that really emphasizes that driving distance, maybe keeping yourself out of water, right? We'd be looking for a very specific type of player, because off the tee, you can have your plotters, you can have your bombers have success around here. I think it opens it up a little bit, and you're going to see that out there with the players that we're getting to, which, speaking of, we're going to start at the top end of the board with maybe the most bomber sort of player that you can find in this kind of field. It's a Wyndham Clark at $10,400. I've been really high on him recently, and there's a good reason why. This guy's ball striking has been a lot better than what most people would expect. So you take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, you'll see that he's gaining across all 4 stat categories. And if you zoom into the last 12 measured rounds, you can see that holds up, gaining very consistently across the board. But most notably, off the tee and on approach, he's been a lot sharper over his last 2-3 events than what we've seen for most of 2024. So things are starting to trend in the right direction out there for Wyndham, most notably out there with his mid to long irons, and at a golf course where you can miss fairways, right? As long as you're not missing out of bounds or out there in the trees, you're going to be totally fine around a Silverado golf resort and spa. Wyndham Clark is built for these kind of tracks, where you can go out there, just try and score the par fives where you're going to do a lot of your damage. He's got the highest birdie or better percentage by far of anyone in this field. And at an event where, it might be 15, might be 20 under par that ends up winning this thing, he can almost get to 15 under par, at least close to that, on the par fives alone, let alone when you add in all of that birdie or better upside that he's going to have on the par threes and par fours. There's a reason why I think he added this to his schedule. I think he's feeling really good about his game. You've heard him say so in some of the quotes that we've had from him over the last month or so, and I think it's going to culminate in a win. He's playing that good of golf from tee to green that he's going to go out there and spike one of these performances, because we know the upside with the flat stick. I mean, this is a course where you could go out there and run the tables with the putter, and while I don't think that's something you want to count on out there for Wyndham Clark, it's well within his range of outcomes. And when you add that putting upside, the ability to make 7-8 birdies out there in a given round, to the kind of ball striking that we've seen from Wyndham Clark, that's why I have all the excitement in getting there. So I think at DFS he might be an even better play from the outright market, where I got him there at 12-1. But at DFS, where birdie or better upside is everything that we're going for, he's by far the best player in this field when it comes to that category. So you can see I've got him as the number 11 total mono ranking. So there are a few other players in the field that are checking a few more boxes. But in terms of long-term form and upside, especially in those large field GPPs where we're looking for that top 3-year win to go out there and pay off this kind of price tag, he has the kind of upside to get to that kind of score. There are a few guys up there, I won't name them, that maybe don't have as much of that top end upside, that some people are going to play more than somebody like a Wyndham Clark this week. So I'm going to be very interested, or very keeping a close eye on, I should say, on the ownership of a Wyndham Clark, because if he's going to be sub 25% owned, I'm going to be thrilled to go out there and get some exposure. So he's an example of one of the sort of bomber players that I'm going out there taking at this kind of event that is going to be a little bit different than some of the other options that we're taking. Mav McNeely, I wouldn't call him a bomber or an accurate player off the tee. A lot of this is the form that we've seen from Maverick heading into this event. You take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, he's gaining in every category but on approach. You take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, and it's the same exact stat profile. He's been a lot more consistent here in 2024. He's been a much better player, period, here this year after returning from the injury in 2023. And 2022, I think we all had these aspirations for Mav, right? We all thought that he was going to turn into this sort of player eventually. When he had that injury happen last year, really derailed his season, and 6 to 9 months of his career really went sideways out there for Mav McNeely. He's finally starting to play like I think a lot of us were expecting him to. He's a world-class talent, especially with everything but the irons. I'm starting to have my eye water here a bit, I guess because of how much I like Mav McNeely. Something in my contact, of course, causing me an issue over there. But what I really like is the event history as well. It's been a little sporadic. He's had some missed cuts out there, but 3 years ago, back there in, I guess it was 2022, the calendar year, he finished in second place. So he ended up finishing runner-up out there to Max Homa when he won this for the first time. And if it weren't for Max Homa having an absolute masterclass out there, he'd be a defending champion around Silverado Resort and Spa. So I don't think a lot of people give him the credit for that because of the fact that he has, a couple missed cuts sandwiched around that. And in a large field GPP play, just like we're looking for upside with Wyndham Clark, right? We're hoping you can go out there and run the table a little bit. You kind of get that with Mav McNeely. It's that home run threat, that maybe low floor play that can go out there and miss the cut. But at the same time, in large field GPPs, which is where I'm getting my exposure out here in DFS, I'm looking for top 5 equity. I'm looking for win equity out there from an outright bet. And at 22.5 to 1, out there in GPPs at $9,400, he has that kind of upside that I'm hoping for at this kind of event. So I don't think he's a great cash play. I don't think he's the type of play that I'd be really building around in single entries even. But in large field GPPs, I'll use him as a core play because his upside comparatively is, I honestly think, the highest of any of these 9K players. He's got a wider range of outcomes than Corey Connors. Corey Connors, a very high floor player, but I don't know if he has as much top 3 or top 5 equity as somebody like a of Mav McNeely. Somebody like Keith Mitchell is notorious, right, for just killing you with consistency. Not a whole lot of top 5 and top 10s in 2024 for Keith, though. So if you're looking for that spike performance, which for a 10K golfer is going to be at least a top 5 finish, the player that I have the most top 5 equity on, and it's not particularly close in this 9K range, is Mav McNeely. And a lot of that's the putting upside. He can run the table like a Wyndham Clark, but the ball striking and his game in general really fits this style of golf course. And you saw that come to fruition back there 3 years ago. So we're going to need that kind of performance to go out there and make the optimal lineup, because $9,400 is a steep price tag out there for Mav McNeely, but it is far from undoable for somebody of his talent level. And the last core play we'll talk there, we're going to have 3 more value plays that we talk about towards the bottom end of the board. Is going to be Eric Cole at $8,700. And it's probably more expensive than you'd like for Eric Cole. That's going to be the case in a field that isn't, as top heavy as what you'd be hoping for a regular tour event. But he's plus 4,000 to win, so I took a little bit of a sprinkle on that from the outright perspective. But what you like is that this is a golf course where off the tee is not emphasized. You've had guys like Max Homa win this back-to-back. I mean, even Sahith Theegala, right? Not the best off the tee player. I think most people would admit. Eric Cole, that's his big bugaboo. That's his main issue out there in the PGA Tour. Because if you take a look at the last 12, maybe even the last 24 measured rounds, everything but off the tee has been there. So last 12 measured rounds, positive in every category but off the tee. And then very surprisingly, actually, slight loser out there with the putter. Take a look at the last 24 measured rounds. You can see it's the same thing, except he's gaining out there with the putter now. So, we kind of know what to expect from Eric. He's a world-class talent, maybe even a top 20 player out there in every category but off the tee. And when we get him at a golf course where off the tee is not as big a deal, that's where he's going to pop. So that's why I like playing him during these fall series events. Not only are we going to have golf courses that aren't as off the tee heavy, that aren't going to be 8,000 yards like what you had for the BMW Championship, you're going to be getting courses and fields, I should say, also a lot weaker fields out here this time of year that are going to really suit Eric Cole. So I like him in these weaker fields. I think his top 5, top 10 equity is through the roof out there in this sort of play. And I even bet him outright. I think he's got a chance to go out there and get a win at this sort of tour event. Now, would I bet him in, a stronger field, maybe what we have out there in, January, February, when we're getting full fields again? Probably not, because I don't know if he's going to beat a full field event. I don't know if he's that sort of player long term. It's going to go out there and win all that often. But against some slappies, against 3, maybe 4 tour caliber players, like top 20 guys out there in the PGA Tour, well, we've got Wyndham Clark, Sahith, maybe Max Homa at this stage. I mean, he's iffy, right? Even at this stage of his career, with the kind of form that we've seen, he's got a legit chance to go out there and beat those sort of players. So that's why I took him for the outright. But I think for DFS, he's an even better option than maybe what we have for the outright, because he's going to make a lot of birdies. He's one of the best putters in the field. You can see on Bent Poa is a pretty solid putter himself. And then with the iron play, a course that doesn't emphasize that off the tee play, again, all of that kind of plays into the Eric Cole skill set. So he's the kind of guy I'm looking for down here in the 8K range. He's going to come with some ownership, I would imagine. I can't think that Eric Cole would be one of the lower owned guys down here in the 8K range. There are players with worse form that I think are going to come in lower owned. So like Harris English, for example, right? I think he'll be one of your pieces of leverage, but I also don't think he's going to be mega chalky, because he's number 52 in recent form ranking, because he's losing so much off the tee over his last 12 measured rounds. Maybe that keeps his ownership a little bit lower than it should be. And guys like a JJ Spawn might be slightly higher owned. You might have slightly higher ownership out there, and guys like a Dungim, a Svensson, those sort of guys. If that's going to be the case, give me Eric Cole. Eric Cole's just as good, if not a clearly better player than all those other guys that we mentioned. And a lot of this form, we got to remind ourselves, a lot of it was from over a month ago. I mean, even guys that made the playoffs were able to get out there to maybe the BMW Championship, or in a few cases, they were able to make it out there to East Lake. There was a week in between East Lake and then what we had here, and 90% of the field didn't even make it to the BMW Championship. So you're talking about at least a 3-week break for a majority of this field, let alone the ones that didn't even make the playoffs, that have had at least a month break, if not longer, out there since their last PGA Tour start. So, if people are going to overreact to that last 12 rounds, which, by the way, isn't even bad for Eric Cole. He's played totally fine golf over his last 3-4 measured events on the PGA Tour. If people are going to overreact to that, especially after a break, then by all means, give me that, right? Like McNeely, his form, by the way, I know we talked about that, looked pretty solid across the board. Even we have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt because it's coming from those 3-4 weeks ago. Wyndham, right, he played the whole way through Eastlake, so I guess his form would be a little bit more current. Also worth noting that the guys that played in the playoffs played it in much better fields, so it was harder for them to go out there and try and gain strokes to the field. So a lot of these guys, even like a Maverick, right? You gotta, take a look at it with a grain of salt. But guys like a Wyndham, you almost want to give more credit to with their shots gain metrics. Hell, same thing with like a Thagala, a Max Homa that made it most of the way through the playoffs. These guys had to play against the world's best for their last 2-3 events. Not everyone else in the field can say that. So I think it's a week where the shots gain metrics can be a little bit wonky. They can get you a little bit offline if you're not careful about what you're looking at. But just know that those kind of trends, that kind of outlier or that kind of data stuff can be going on a week like this. And just keep it in the back of your head, right? Know that that's going to be a factor to keep in mind and that could really shape how you're looking at players if you're not careful. Before we talk about our value plays for this week, do want to remind you where you can find all of this information that you're finding here in the videos. Of course, that is over there on my Patreon page. So on there, you can download all of these spreadsheets without anything being censored. That includes my projections, modeling, ownership, my entire player pool out there for main slate and showdown slates over there on the Patreon page. And the best part about it is it's only $15 a month to get access to all of that information. So whether you're a main slate player, a showdown player for rounds 2 through 4, I'm going to have you covered with all the research and projections that you guys need to go out there and get your process started. And just because it's the swing season, just because I'm also covering NFL, does not mean that we're going to not look at golf out here for the fall, right? You can obviously tell with these videos that we're continuing that content going forward. And if you want to make sure you're at a site that is prioritizing golf just as much, if not honestly even more than NFL out there this time of year, make sure to check out my Patreon page. I'm a huge golf guy. I'm not just a DFS guy, right? I'm out there, play the things that I'm very passionate about. And this time of year, we've got golf and football going on. It's maybe a little bit of extra work from my end, definitely my busiest time of the year, but I wouldn't trade it for anything, right? These are the two sports that I love to cover, and just because we've got two going on at the same time, again, does not mean that I'm going to take less time away from it. So if you guys are all about that, if you guys are just as passionate about golf and football as I am, we've got the golf stuff on there, also my football content that I'm sure a lot of you guys have been seeing there on the YouTube. And if you want all of that, there are combined tiers to give you both golf and football. So the Patreon page, $15 will give you guys all of this DFS stuff. I also have prop content posted for both golf and for football. And if you want everything all in one, so you've got props out there for both sports and DFS out there for both sports, I do offer an all-inclusive package, which is $40 a month, which compared to the other sites out there is by far the best value that you're going to find. So check it out if you guys haven't already. Again, link in the description to go out there and join that. Help support the channel and give you guys, all the information that I'm doing and making every single week. But let's talk about these last three values now. Let's move a little bit further down the board. We've talked about some bombers so far. We've talked about, a shorter player out there with Eric Cole. Now this is where you're really going to see me looking at different types of players. Like I said, there's not really one mold of player that we're necessarily looking for at the Procore Championship. And on the exact opposite end of the spectrum from a bomber like a Wyndham Clark is we've got Matt Kuchar at $7,900. I took him for a top 10, so no outright bet on Matty Kuch. I think it's a little bit too late into his career to be counting on him to go out there and win one of these things. But a top 10 for him at a golf course that he's played very well at in his career is something that I'll do, especially with the form he has coming in. You can see in terms of total model ranking, this is absurd, by the way, how well he's been playing over the last few months. He's number 5 in the field. Now, some of this form is coming from, a month ago, so we have to take it with a grain of salt, yada, yada, right? We've already mentioned, had that talk multiple times throughout this video already, but look at the event history. We're getting Kuch, who's seemingly hitting the ball well. He finished 7th year last year, and he was coming in with horrible form. He finished 12th the year before that, even worse form than what we're in right now. In the last 3 times he's played here, I know T36 isn't that great, but at least he made the cut out here at this kind of event. You've got plenty of other guys in this range that have got missed cuts in there. You've got Hughes, you've got KH Lee, right, with 2 missed cuts. Hell, even Mav McNeely, who I'm taking as a core play, right, had 2 missed cuts mixed in his last 3 starts around this event. Not for Matt Kuchar. He's made his last 3, and he has 2 top 12 finishes over the last 2 years. So we're getting an informed Kuch, one that seemingly really likes this golf course. He said that he likes Napa. He likes the wine out there. So Maybe it's just good vibes that he has out there. Napa Valley week is getting some good old red wine in him out there in the system. Either way, I'm playing him this week. He's playing good golf. He's done nothing but impress us around a Silverado resort and spa, coming in with the number 2 recent farm ranking of anyone in the field. Like, sure, I'll take a few sprinkles of exposure out there in my lineups this week. Now, the ownership is where it could get tricky. I think that he's going to get some steam this week. If he was such a no-brainer play for me to get to out here on a Monday, I'd imagine that a lot of other people in the industry are probably saying the same thing about Matt Kuchar. And while the ownership is going to be a huge question mark to us, it's pretty much unknown out there on a Monday afternoon, I'm expecting him to be at least 10% owned. I think he's probably going to be 10, maybe 12% projected ownership by the time we get over there to Wednesday. And if he's in that 10 to 12% range, I'll probably still play him in about a quarter of my lineups. But if we start to get a increasingly chalky Matt Kuchar, maybe he is like 15% plus owned, that's where I might have to try and reconsider it a little bit. So no matter what, I like the top 10 at plus 500. I think he fits this golf course quite well. If anything, right, he's playing the best golf that he has heading into this event over the last few years. And he's already impressed around Silverado. So that's the idea of getting to a Matt Kuchar. And I guess I like to point him out here as well to show you that it's not just like bombers, high scoring players on par 5s that I'm looking for. There are a few other ways to get it done. Might be the course history angle, might be the fact that he just ball strikes this place to death, right? I know I said the fairway rate was sub 50%. Kuchar hits 65% of his fairways around here. So I don't know if it's his ball flight. He just has a really good game plan for hitting the fairways around Silverado, but he seemingly has figured out that puzzle a little bit, and that's why I want to get to him out there. Next up, we've got Michael Thorbjornsen. So I actually bet him outright at 75-1, and he's on the opposite side of a Matt Kuchar, right? We went from Wyndham Clark bomber out there to plotter out there with Matt Kuchar, and now we're going back to the bomber side. Michael Thorbjornsen could very well be Wyndham Clark in 2 years. Now, this is a huge hot take, but he was the number 1 in the NCAA standings, right? Going out there, got his tour card based on how well he played out there in collegiate golf, and he hasn't really done shit yet, right? We've heard a lot of good things about Thorbjornsen, but what I'll remind you is that before he got his tour card, right, he did unbelievable things out there on tour. He almost won at the, Travelers Championship. I think it was 3 years ago. When he was an amateur, I think he was like 18 years old, went out there, was in the final few groups out there at the Travelers Championship, which, by the way, one of the better fields in golf. He went out there, it was in contention out there. Oh, what else did he do? He was in contention at a major championship after the first few days. And that was also when he was still an amateur. He was the number 1 college player in the world. And the reason why I remind you of this is a lot of people are starting to forget that after his start to this year. And just like I said, the form before doesn't really matter, right? You got to take it with a grain of salt. This is the kind of player that could really benefit from some time off. You give him 2-3, in his case, like a whole month to go out there and reset, work on his golf swing a little bit, and maybe he can come out here in this fall swing and show us why he was the world number 1 college player. Because, I mean, we saw what happened with Obear. He went out there. He's one of the best players on tour now. I'm not saying that's going to happen for Thorbjornsen, but, you give him a few years to grow into his skill set. He might be the longest player on the PGA Tour, by the way. Even now, right before he's fully grown into his body, he has some of the most power that you'll see of anyone out there. He reminds me of a future Wyndham Clark. He's got the physical skills to go out there and do so. He has the pedigree, being the world number 1 college player, coming out to go out there and be that sort of player. He's just got to grow into it. So you're certainly buying early on Michael Thorbjornsen. If you're going to take him this week in DFS, I do think he'll be low owned because of how he started. You're buying the long-term upside. You're buying that long-term pedigree that so many people have talked about out there with Thor, and that we've even seen before out there in big field events before. So it's shot in the dark. You're going to have to do that in GPPs if you want to go down and take down one of those large field contests. And he could very well be that quote-unquote surprising name that goes out there and finishes top 5. But I don't know if it'd be all that surprising to me and to other people that have seen this guy play before. He's clearly got a lot more talent than I would say almost anyone else in this field. Like long-term talent-wise, he's up there with like a Sahith. I mean, he had a better college career than Sahith. He had a much better college career than guys like a Wyndham Clark and Homa. And obviously, while these sort of guys grew into their skill set as time went on, Thorbjornsen is starting at a better starting point than a lot of those players, and I think has that kind of talent level written all over him long-term. So if I'm going to be that high on the kid, obviously you don't have to be, right? You can choose to avoid him if you'd like to, but if you have that kind of take on somebody, you should probably play them in DFS. So that's why I bet him at 75 to 1. Also why I'm using him at relatively low ownership in large field contests. Then the last player that we're going to talk about here is Matthew NeSmith at $7,100. He's number 7 in recent form ranking. He's a top 25 total model ranking play, so I don't necessarily get the price tag, right? He's way cheaper than he probably should be. And a top 10 at plus 900 feels very fair for a player that's been playing some of the best golf by far of anyone in this field. So if we go down to the last 12 measured rounds, you see that he's gaining in every category but around the green. And most surprisingly, most notably out here, he's getting close to 3/4 of a stroke per round on approach and over half a stroke putting per round, which are by far the two most important categories. There are number 1 and 2 categories out there for this kind of event. And what you do with NeSmith is you play him when he's playing good golf. He's the sort of guy that can find a feel out there with his irons and sustain it long term. Now, the issue for NeSmith is that he's had that break. He's had a few weeks off. So if the ownership is going to be high on NeSmith, I'm still going to be totally fine with this top 10 bet out there at plus 900. But in DFS, we are going to have to look at the ownership here, because if other people are seeing what I am out there with the recent form metrics, like I said, top 10 in the field down here at $7,100, I'd have to imagine that he's going to be at least 10% owned. If he's in that 10 to 12% range, like what we had out there with Matt Kuchar, I'll probably still play him out there in my lineups. If he's going to be 15% plus owned, which that would surprise me, but I guess anything's possible out there in large field GPPs, that's when I'd have to reconsider playing him, because outside of that, I love the play. Again, the form coming in is exactly what we're looking for. You go back to the last 24 measured rounds, so you even zoom out a little bit, and he's still playing excellent golf, gaining in 3 of the 4 stat categories, only losing around the green, which again is identical to what he's doing over the last 12 measured rounds. I just think we're getting a Matthew NeSmith that is starting to round into form, and historically, he's the kind of guy that you want to ride when he's playing that kind of golf. So that's why I've got him out there in the player pool, top 10 at plus 900. I think in this week of field was an absolute steal. Like, if you're giving me a top 10 in a regular tour event, I'm probably not nearly as excited to get to this bet as I normally would be, but you're talking about maybe the weakest field that we have had all of the actual 2024 year, then yeah, give me Matt NeSmith out there at 9 to 1 for a top 10. So that was the idea there. Again, ownership is going to be the big driving force when it comes to whether playing him in GPPs or not. But if we get sub 10% of Matt NeSmith, maybe that's a pipe dream, maybe it's not. By the time we get out there to Wednesday, if he's sub 10%, he's going to be one of my favorite plays on the entire slate, let alone what we have down here in the 7K range. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview this week. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared to get out to some of your exposure. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll include, of course, our Wednesday live stream at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, going through all of your questions, weather before lock, ownership, all of those sort of things that we normally talk about on a Wednesday. So make sure to stop on by for that with any questions that you've got. But like, subscribe as I mentioned, and then down below in the comments, I want to hear who you've got winning this golf tournament. If you can go out there, give me the winner this week, and they are at least 20 to 1 to go out there and win on sportsbooks, then you'll win a free month of that Patreon page, which of course is where I'm posting all those projections that I was talking about, whether it's for NFL, golf, on the projection side or on the prop side of things. I've got you guys covered. And if you win this contest, you will win a full membership. So not just what I'm doing over there on the golf side week in, week out, but also the NFL, DFS, and prop content that I'm posting too. So make sure to go ahead, enter that giveaway if you haven't already. And as I said, as long as they're at least 20 to 1 on sportsbooks to go out there and win, they will be eligible for this contest. So first come, first serve, early bird gets the worm. Once a player is taken once out there for this giveaway, they cannot be taken again. So if you're here early, you're one of the first ones to watch. Well, congrats to you. You pretty much have anyone to choose from that you'd like. Just let me know down below. Let's go out there and have ourselves a week. That's all I've got, guys. Appreciate your support, as I said before. Check out the Patreon page if you guys want all that behind the scenes info, and best of luck with all of your exposure this week, whether it's in DFS contests or over there on the prop side.